Welcome. Today we have Brooke Leverson with us as a certified clinical research coordinator to talk to us about her job and what she does. So with that job title, what does that actually mean? What is it that you do?
It means that I work in the cancer center. We have cancer patients that there's multiple different study drugs and trials and medications that they can take to help with their cancers. And I coordinate the different study trials that they can go on so that they can have free medication to help with their cancers. So I work with the different companies that give the drug to the patients.
How long have you been doing that?
I have been in this role in the cancer center for just over 11.
And was there education you had to take to get into that job, or how did you land yourself in that job and are still there?
So at first, back when I started about 11 years ago, it was suggested that you have either a 2 or a 4-year degree. It was not required at the time, but once you were on board, they wanted you to at least take medical terminology. That's a big one that they really like to have. And then if there are any other medical courses, they would prefer that. Now, if somebody were to try to get a job in our area now, it does require either a 2 or a 4-year degree or a master's. There's different levels, but they do require schooling, and they really emphasize on like the medical terminology piece of it.
Well, and I'm sure with the cancer program, you're going to have a lot of drugs and a lot of language that not just anyone's going to know. So you're going to need to have those classes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you said you were in this job about 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
Could you go through a day for us and tell us what it's like in that job? If you're working with a patient with direct care, or how that actually works?
Sure. So the cancer center is a little bit different than most of the other areas because like every department, like cardiology, neurology, they all have different, trials that they do. And their coordinators kind of run the trial from beginning to end, where they start the study, they meet with the patients, discuss it with them. They enter the data that we collect into the database, where the cancer center, we're so big and there's so many different kinds of cancers that we are all kind of split out into different things that we do. So we have a group that, the protocol development unit that works with developing the protocol. Then there is the clinical research coordinators who see the patients on the floor with the physicians, discuss their appointments, everything like that. And then there's the data side of it, where that's what I do. I worked out in the front with all of the patients right when I first started there, out at the desk before this job. And the cancer center is just a very hard area to work in. It's very disheartening, when they're not doing well. So I specifically work with leukemia patients. So it is hard. So I ended up transferring into my area to do the data side of it 11 years ago, and I love it. So on a typical day, our patients are seen on the floor, and they meet with the physician, they meet with the clinical coordinator, and, go over, since starting a medication that on the trials that we may be running, how are you feeling? Has it made you sick? Has it, upset your stomach? Have you lost any hair? Do you have body aches? Things like that. They go through a whole appointment. Then all of that information, the physicians note all of their labs they had drawn, if they had a bone marrow biopsy, all of those things that happened to them while they were taking this study medication then comes to me, and I enter all of that information into the study-specific database to give the company information on how this drug is doing with patients with leukemia. So on a typical day, it kind of runs through the steps, and then that information comes to me. And I run about 10 or 11 studies right now for different kinds of drugs that patients are taking. So yeah,
Wow.
that's a typical day, you know, there.
Yeah, very interesting. I didn't realize all of that was going on kind of behind the scenes. So very cool. You mentioned starting at the desk. So when you transferred to this role, what was it that encouraged you or allowed you to want to transfer from doing that desk one-on-one patient care position to something like this?
When I worked out at the desk, it was mainly, you know, checking the patients in, bringing them to a room, doing their vitals, but I didn't really get to help them. You know, I didn't get that piece of my job is making a difference. So when these jobs came about, you know, like when I realized what started coordinators did, you know, like their job, I really wanted that piece of I am making a difference for these, you know, patients, and I'm helping them. And, you know, so I transferred into this role in the same department. I was in the same department, but I just transferred into this role, and I've been here ever since because I know that what I'm doing is making a difference, but, you know, I'm just a softie. So actually seeing them and being more one-on-one with them was really hard for me. So I know I can still make a difference and be on the backside of it and working with these different companies because, you know, I don't know, I'm sure people have heard of the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. They're like the number one, we're running these trials to see if we can get these out on the market. They're safe for everybody to use. You know, when you hear a commercial like, oh, here's this medication, but these are the side effects, that's what we're doing. We are the ones that are trying to find out, does this medication work? What are the side effects? You know, and things like that. So I actually have worked with the FDA. So yeah.
Very cool. When you're looking at this role, is there opportunity for advancement in your job? I mean, you mentioned if you had more degrees, you could go further, but describe that for us.
Yes, that was the other reason I transferred into this role as well, because, you know, when you're out at the desk, like where to go, you know, after that, because everybody wants to advance. In our specific role, there are multiple levels, but then within our department, there's also more levels outside of what I do that you can move on to once you've had this experience. So in my role, we have an associate clinical research coordinator, which is your 2-year degrees. You have your clinical research coordinators, which is your 4-year degrees. And then you have a senior coordinator level, which is a master's degree. And then with that, they have like, you have to have a master's degree or 4 years of school with 5 years experience. So there's like little limitations of like to work with it so that people with 4-year degrees can still do the job. They just need to have 5 years experience because you have to independently run these trials, you know, where the associates have more help when, you know, they're not as complicated trials. And then along with that, it's something within the coordinator role, they have a SOCRA certification. So it's doing some, you know, learning. It's just a certification though. It's not college. It's not a diploma. It's not anything like that. It's a lot of learning. And then you take a test, which I have heard it's as hard as your nursing board. I've never taken a nursing board, but I've done the SOCRA test and it is very hard, but I did pass. And so that's another certification I have. So that's another level that like an ACRC or a CRC or a senior can also do above and beyond to have that extra piece of certification. And then we have to recertify every 3 years to keep our certification up, take a test, and things like that. So that's another little piece. And then from there, you can do program coordinators. Once you've been a coordinator, you can do program coordinators. You can be on the financial piece of it, like, the money side of these studies. There's the protocol development unit, and then within those, there's levels. There's 1, 2, 3. So there's lots of room for growth in this area.
Sounds like it. Sounds like a very supportive and program that allows you to get more education and do more.
Mm-hmm.
Would you describe for us maybe a benefit of what it's like in that role and like why you choose to stay there and not look for something else?
For a lot of reasons, I think, because, it's also a hospital. So, with families, like I stay because there's no nights and weekends. There's no holiday shifts, so a lot of like your doctors, nurses, even out at the desk, depending upon what hours they're open, you're working nights, weekends, evenings, holidays, so one of the big things is, I want a day job, I don't want to work the nights and weekends and holidays. So that piece is, one of the reasons I stay. The other reason is, like I said, I get so much joy out of helping these patients that, if I was in a different area that, a foot clinic or something, like I just have a heart for it because I personally know people who have cancer. I've known what they've gone through. And, my best friend had cancer. So it's like, it really hits home for me and it's very rewarding for me. And I really enjoy the job and the work I do. So that's why I stay. And like, my supervisor's amazing. My coworkers are amazing. We've got a really good group of people. So those are the main reasons I stay. And, I have moved up slowly. But as myself, I started the job with no schooling. So I've done my medical terminology class through RCTC. I've done the SOCR certification. And I think, once my children get a little bit older, I would like to go back and get the higher degrees so that I can continue to, move up and go to different, positions within my area.
Gotcha. So if a high school student is watching this and says, this sounds like something I'm interested in, what would be a high school class or classes that they could consider to take that would help them get in the right pathway to do this?
I would say definitely your maths, your science, things like that, because we deal a lot with like numbers, and equations and, and just having the science background of, because like in my area, we deal with blood, hemoglobins and, all the different pieces of that and bone marrow biopsies. And so math and science is really good, especially in high school. And then once you get into college, any of your medical fields, but truly it's all preferred. So if you have a 4-year degree in something else, you can work in our area. It's just, if there's somebody with this and this, and they're trying to decide, if you've got that background, they're more likely, to hire somebody who's got any of the medical terminology or health information. I know there's like a HIT program, there's different types of programs out there. There's a radiology program, things like that. So definitely though, your math, sciences, things like that.
Okay. And do you have advice for a youth watching this who maybe this isn't the path they want to go down, but they're just starting that researching process? Do you have any advice for them that's starting to look at a future plan?
Yeah. For me, generally when you think of hospitals, you think of doctors and nurses, but there is so much more, like so many other career paths where, you know, if you want to be, you know, in a nursing field because you're like, well, I know nurses, you know, make good money and, you know, things like that. And you think that's, you know, the path you want to go down and you love taking care of patients. You still have that piece. You still are taking care of patients and you're still caring for them, just in a different way. You know, if you like more of the behind the scenes, like what I'm doing, you know, you're still, you know, caring for the patient. You're still, you know, that interaction, but you're, you know, behind the scenes, there's the more business side of it. There's, you know, there are so many opportunities to still care for the patient, help them. It's just not that one-on-one, you know, like me personally, I am deathly scared of needles. So I couldn't be a nurse because needles freak me out. I don't think I could ever, you know, put a needle in anybody or, you know, like there's just those pieces of the actual nursing that I wouldn't want to do. But, you know, I'm still doing very well. You still make great money. You still have so many opportunities, you know, that you can just do it differently. I mean, there's so many pieces of administration and parts that it's not just always, you know, doctors, nurses. There's multiple different things you can do and many options out there.
All right. Well, thank you for your time today, Brooke. We appreciate all your knowledge that you were able to share.
Absolutely.